Hi, I'm Amy Baldwin. I'm here with Laurie Hazard, and we're talking about extended absences. November is a typical month that we see students not coming to class for a variety of reasons. Laurie, talk a little bit about what what causes students to miss more than a couple of days. Maybe they're gone a week. Maybe they're gone, a couple of weeks. What are some influences around that?
I think we're always going to see students having illnesses like the flu, strep throat, mono, colds, those kinds of things. Students can be absent for those reasons. So it's really important, obviously, for them to manage their health and wellness and their physical health. But I think we've also seen an increase in students experiencing mental health issues, particularly post-pandemic, like anxiety and depression, and not really knowing how to manage through that, especially if they're not at home. So they may
Mhm.
have extended absences because of that. I also think about students who, despite going away to college, may still have family obligations, or commuters that still have family obligations. And they may be, again, sort of a strong word, they might get stuck in the vortex of getting pulled back into their family obligations. And that can be difficult because sometimes parents and families don't know the amount of time that it takes to be successful in college. And then sometimes, particularly student athletes, we see students who have injuries like a concussion, or they broke their ankle, or they had a sprain, or students who might, in the middle of the semester, have an emergency surgery crop up, like appendicitis, or um, it could be a variety of different things. And so it puts the students in the position where they have to really self-advocate, and reach out to their faculty members to negotiate the absences. And that can be hard because students think of a faculty member as an authority figure. And there may also be that hesitation of disclosing personal stuff that's creating a situation that they're
Mhm.
absent for an extended period of time. And all of this can get really complicated.
Yeah, I am thinking about all the students that I have and all the variety of reasons why they may not have been attending regularly. And one chunk of them are students who've told me that there's something that's happening at home and they have to leave. And unfortunately, sometimes this is an extended period. So I have a student that has missed 2 or 3 weeks, and because of something that was going on that pulled her back. Then I have people who it's not that in particular, they're just the mental health and the overwhelm and the stress has caused them to choose not to come because being in class just exacerbates that, and I guess, or they think it does. um, and I just wonder, are families aware of the learning loss? Like, you can't just show up 3 weeks later having had no contact, no communication other than, hey, I'm out, and then expect to kind of just continue on as if nothing happened. What would you say to parents and families if they're bringing that student back in home for sometimes very important reasons, but what would you tell them about what's going on or what could go on if they're doing that?
I think parents and families need to be aware that this isn't like their K through 12 experience. The pace and the volume of work and the expectations are so much higher than in um, secondary education.
Mhm.
So I think families really need to ask the question, to what extent is it that important to have that student at home? Because if they do miss even a couple of days of classes, depending on the course and the pace of the course, it may be almost impossible for the student to make up the work. And
Mhm.
that could create a situation where they're going to fall behind, even in their progress toward degree, if they have to drop a class because they've been out for too long. So I think it's really important for families to have that difficult conversation. Um, do you really need to be at home? And then there's that whole, like, family first.
Mhm.
And, can faculty and staff understand that students have to put their family first sometimes? So there's certainly that tension, in
Mhm.
trying to make those really difficult decisions, which in the future they'll have to make in the workplace as well. But I think if parents and families can try to be a little bit flexible and allow their students to stay on campus, unless it is what could be defined as a true emergency, and that has to be defined as a family.
Right, right. And you mentioned that, maybe families being flexible or being understanding, about what the student's pathway is and what the ramifications are. Because I think you're right. Sometimes I had a conversation with a student who lives 6 hours away. Her father expected her to be home every weekend, 6 hours away, and be home every weekend. And I said, are you okay with that? Is that, and she said, no, no, it's really cutting into my ability to work. She was working part-time, and studying, and, 12 hours in the car, was time she couldn't do other things. And she mentioned he thinks it's high school. He thinks that I have a schedule like it's high school, or I'm learning and doing like it's high school. And so we talked a little bit about, the kinds of conversations she might be able to have with him that would help her. But even if they are pulled back, and even if faculty are flexible, and a lot of faculty, once they are aware of what's going on, are often willing to do something to help the student and support the student. You said, there's learning loss there. And what I encounter is, even whenever I work with a student, okay, you're going to be out. These are the things you need to be aware of. This is what you need to be still working on if you can. When they come back, it's the overwhelm of, now I've got to enter back into this daily routine, and I have to make up stuff that I missed. And that's where I see a lot of times students really struggle more so coming back. And I don't know, you know, what we can tell parents and families about that, but I think they don't necessarily realize that entering back in is stressful too.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm reminded of a seminal work by Richard Rodriguez about a first generation college student, where he talks about, it's his own autobiography, and he talks about that real challenge of straddling two worlds, like having one
Mhm.
foot at home and one foot at school, and how it's really difficult to reconcile that. So I think if parents know how difficult it is for students, especially if they're a first year student and it's their college transition, trying to manage the incredible change in environment between high school and their secondary education environment to their college environment, and trying to straddle those two worlds can be nearly impossible.
Yeah.
And some students manage that stress tolerance a little bit better, and some can't, and it puts students in a real emotional bind, really. Like, where do I put my loyalties and energy and dedication and resources, because it's hard to do both in some cases.
And when you were sharing that, it just and by the way, I've read that book. Just wanted to make a note. I've read that book, maybe on the shelf in here. But there's also the other side of it that I hadn't really thought about till you were talking. That students may feel emotionally obligated to be home. Especially if it's an illness, or an accident or something, where the rest of the family is going through some grieving process, or some emotional turmoil. That student may feel guilty that they are not participating in that family process.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
yeah, so families, even if you said, because my husband and I've had this conversation about, like, we would tell our kid, unless you can do heart surgery, we don't need you home. We need you there finishing up, your classes. But I hadn't thought about that. My kids' emotional needs might be, oh, I'm worried about my family, or I'm worried I'm not there to give the support that I want to. And so maybe having
Yeah,
conversations around how can you still do that but still stay focused on being in your classes.
yeah. I think it is, because students will say, I decided to stay here at school, but I can't concentrate because I'm so worried about my grandmother, or I'm so worried
Mhm.
about my sibling or my parent. Um, so it's really challenging, and it is that emergent adulthood question, right? That when you're an adult, you have to start grappling with these difficult choices, and it's really the start of that for students when they go away to college, and not easy, not an
Yeah,
easy adulthood task to manage.
yeah. So let's talk about one more reason students may have extended absences, which could really impact their success at the end of the semester, and that is they just choose not to go to class. I have some of those every semester who, it's clear that some of it may be stress related. Some of it also may be they just feel unmotivated, not particularly interested in the topic, or they find other classes seem more important to them or more challenging and require more time. So, what kind of conversation at the end of the semester if parents and families are finding out that their student has missed a lot, and that is one of the reasons why they weren't successful? Maybe they didn't go at all. I've had parent friends who said, "Oh, I found out why so and so made an F in all her classes. She stopped going in October." What kind of conversations should we be having with students as a parent who is paying for perhaps some part of the
Yeah.
education about this behavior?
I think when you mention lack of motivation, that can stem from a variety of different things. And I think, like an anthropologist, a parent has to kind of ask the question, what's really going on here? So as you were talking, I'm processing what you're saying, and I'm thinking, if the student's not motivated, is it because they didn't want to go to college and they felt forced to by their parents, so they're disengaged? Or is it because they are finding a course challenging, and so going to the course reminds them how ill prepared they are for it. So they're absent a few times, and then going back to the class, they have to face the professor and they feel kind of ashamed, and they get into that cycle. I've seen that happen with students so many times, like, oh, I haven't gone to class for 3 days and now I'm going to be so embarrassed if I go in.
Mhm,
If there's a lack of motivation, there could be some mental health things going on, some anxiety or depression. So I think if parents can really help students get to the root of the why they're not as perhaps engaged as they should be, I think that's an important first step to figure out that what's going on that you can't seem to
mhm,
engage in this
mhm,
um, teaching and learning environment.
mhm. Is it wise to just yell at them about not, "You needed to go"?
No, I mean, I think you have to be non-judgmental and say, the reason doesn't really matter, although it'll help us um
Mhm,
figure out what our next steps are. But I want you to know that I'm here to help you and I'm with you, and we've got to figure this out so that um you can move toward whatever that goal might be, whether it's stopping
mhm.
out and considering other vocational options, or
Yeah.
whether it's continuing and how you can manage to thrive if you're going to continue. And, attendance and going to class is the first step.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I have a student that I talked to this semester he's attended, I think, every class, and he said, "I figured out the secret to college is just go to class and do the work." And I said, "It's amazing, isn't it? It's as simple as that."
Yeah.
But, students, especially whenever they're first year students, they sometimes play around with the fact that, "Oh, I can go and I can miss class and nobody calls me." No, no parent knows. I mean, I can see sometimes they're playing around with that freedom.
Yes.
It's
Or
just
yeah.
sometimes it can get out of hand, where they're like, I don't have to go at all except for a test. That's
I
not.
think it's important too for parents to kind of talk to students about their peer group, and we've talked about this in other of our conversations, that are they hitching their wagons to people who are not going to class either, and they're
Mhm,
gaming all day long, or they're doing other things that are keeping them away from going to class? Or are they hitching their wagons to other students who are being productive and attending classes? And their peer group can make a real difference. But I also don't want to brush over the anxiety and depression piece, because we know there's been a huge increase with this generation. And the Surgeon General said it's a real health crisis for this generation. And so I think I don't know how families manage through it. I don't know how colleges and universities manage through it, but I think it's a really important conversation. How do we support this generation of young adults who are experiencing these issues in a way that we've never seen before?
Yeah. And I think back to your point, if I were to wrap up kind of our major points is if your student is not successful in a class, um, having a conversation around what happened and maybe a conversation around attendance and seeing if you can find out if that was a contributing factor. And then having curiosity conversations. Tell me more about why it was difficult for you. I have a lot of students that say it was an 8 o'clock class. I just overslept. Okay, let's talk about why that was happening every single week. What can you do differently? Because the goal is to get them to become self-aware of what is causing stumbling blocks, and then also to find solutions and try them out. And if those don't work, finding other ones. Is that fair to say that's what our role is to help our student do?
Yeah, I say for sure, and I'd say parents should do more listening than telling the student what to do. And if that kind of falls apart, um, parents need to know that on college and university campus there are resources. So if a student feels more comfortable talking to a counselor on campus about what's happening, that might be a solution as well.
Yeah, great advice. So just know that faculty try to intervene. They try to coax students, find out what they can do to support them. But if they aren't attending, it's really hard. But I think addressing that as a hey, let's figure out what's going on, and let's make some changes, is a good approach to anything, to any problem.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you, Lori.